The sun rose burning over Snow Bento do Sol, a forgotten village in the middle of the backlands. The wind lifted the red dust from the roads, and the sound of horseshoes echoed far away, mixed with the lowing of cattle and the bark of a tired dog. It was just another day, until the news spread like wildfire. Colonel Duarte was going to hang his own wife. They said Rosa was cursed, that her womb was barren, that no man deserved a woman who could not give him sons. But those who knew the couple knew the problem had never been her. The problem had always been him. Colonel Duarte was the richest man in the region, owner of land that stretched farther than the eye could see, of cattle, of houses, of people. He had the cold gaze of a man who didn't know mercy, and his word carried more weight than the law itself. He always wore the same white hat, the same linen jacket, and the same arrogance of someone who believed the world should bow when he passed. No one dared to contradict him. Until that Sunday. Rosa was 25, but her weary face made her look twice that age. The daughter of poor farmers, she had been given to the colonel in payment of an old debt. Her father, humiliated and cornered, signed the paper and never looked up again. Rosa never loved Duarte. She learned to survive by his side, in silence, with her eyes down and her heart locked away. She tried to please, she prayed, she begged to become the woman he wanted her to be. But her womb stayed empty, and her heart, heavier each day with fear. With every month that passed without a pregnancy, Duarte grew more cruel. He called her barren, cursed, useless. The servants, afraid, pretended not to hear. The laughter disappeared from the ranch. Nights became long and cold. Rosa slept alone, locked in a room without windows, watched like an animal. The colonel said he was cleansing the honor of his house, but all he did was spread shame across the backlands. That morning, as the church bell rang for mass, the townsfolk gathered in the square. The sun was already high when Duarte's men began to build the gallows. The wooden beam was raised in the center, beside the old bandstand, and the rope hung with a clean, tight knot, waiting for the neck that would pay for the sin of not giving an heir. Silence swallowed the village. Not even the priest dared to speak. Rosa was brought out by the colonel's men. She walked barefoot, her hands tied, the hem of her dress torn. The wind blew her black hair across her face. She didn't cry. She just looked forward, like someone who no longer fears anything, because fear had already taken everything. Each step felt heavier than the last. People stepped aside, whispering, but no one spoke out. No one dared face Duarte. From the top of the platform, the colonel lit a cigar and checked his pocket watch. The ticking sounded like thunder. Today, he said aloud, Snow Bento do Sol will learn what happens when someone defies the will of God. He spat the words like venom. Behind him, the sheriff pretended to read a paper, and the priest, sweating, prayed without faith. But the backlands have ears. And at that same moment, a few miles away, a simple man was saddling his horse, unaware that fate was about to call him back. Miguel was a cowboy from the highlands, living alone, caring for the land and his horses like a man in conversation with God. His hands were calloused, his beard thin, his gaze a mix of sadness and courage. It had been years since he'd left the village. Ever since he lost the love of his life, Rosa. They had grown up together, throwing stones into the river, stealing fruit from neighbors, dreaming of a small house, chickens in the yard, and barefoot children running through the dust. But the colonel had bought her father's debt, and with it, her destiny. Miguel tried to stop it. He was beaten nearly to death by Duarte's henchmen and left bleeding by the roadside. Since that day, he had never seen Rosa again. That Sunday, while tightening his saddle, Miguel overheard two travelers talking in the tavern. They say the colonel's hanging his wife today, in front of everyone. Says she's barren. Miguel froze. The cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. What's her name? He asked, breathless. Rosa, the wife of Colonel Duarte. Her name cut through the air like a bullet. Miguel mounted his horse in one leap. If it's her, no man will lay a hand on her while I breathe. He spurred the horse down the dirt road, wind tearing at his face, hat pulled low, heart pounding like a drum. The sun blazed above, the ground burned below, but he didn't stop. He knew every second could be her last. Back in the square, the crowd waited for the spectacle. The colonel stepped forward. Today justice will be done. A woman who can't give a son is a curse, and curses must be cut out by the root. The people lowered their heads. Rosa was placed on a stool, the rope already around her neck. The priest tried to protest. Colonel, this goes against God's law. Duarte silenced him with a stare. God speaks to me, father, and he told me that shame must die. The executioner adjusted the knot. The crowd held its breath. The wind stopped. Only the tolling bell marked the time. Then, the distant sound of hooves, a steady, growing gallop. Men turned their heads. A figure approached through the dust, riding hard. Miguel. The heart of the village seemed to stop. The colonel narrowed his eyes, cigar between his fingers. Who's this fool? The horse reared, and Miguel jumped down before it stopped. He strode to the platform, eyes locked on the woman he'd once loved. Rosa recognized him instantly. The tears came without asking. Miguel shouted, voice echoing through the square. Drop that rope, Colonel. The shame isn't hers, it's yours. Silence exploded. The crowd stepped back. The colonel gave a crooked, mocking smile. And who do you think you are, little cowboy? You think you can change the law of the backlands with pretty words? Miguel stepped closer. Law. The only real law is the one written in a man's heart, and you lost yours long ago. The air was tight with tension. The sun burned their skin. Sweat ran down their faces. Rosa looked at Miguel like she was seeing salvation itself. The colonel gestured to his men. Grab him. But no one moved, not the priest, not the sheriff, not the crowd. Something had shifted in the wind. Miguel climbed one step, face to face with Duarte. You want justice? Then listen to the truth first. Rosa isn't barren. She had a child, and you know it better than anyone. The colonel's face turned pale. The crowd stirred. Rosa trembled, covering her mouth. Miguel, don't. But it was too late. The secret the backlands had buried was rising again. The sun blazed hotter. The dust rose. And the village understood. Snow Bento do Sal would never be the same again. No one breathed. The wind began to blow again, lifting the dust around the gallows. Colonel Duarte held his cigar between trembling fingers, his eyes cornered like a hunted animal. Miguel stood firm, boots covered in dust, hand near his holster but not on the gun. His voice echoed. She had a child. The people exchanged glances. A murmur spread. The sheriff wiped his forehead. The priest looked to the heavens as if waiting for a sign. Rosa, the rope still around her neck, didn't know whether to cry or smile. Miguel stepped closer, sun burning his face. You know what I'm talking about, Colonel, he said. You know what you did to that baby? Duarte gave a short, forced laugh. Cowboy, you've lost your mind. You're spinning tales to die a hero. I'm not spinning tales, Miguel replied. I saw it. I was there when the doctor left the house and said the baby was weak. I saw when you ordered it taken away, so no one would see your shame. The crowd erupted, gasps, cries, whispers rising like a storm. Rosa fell to her knees. The tears dried instantly. Her face now showed only fury and disbelief. Is it true, Duarte? She rasped. Did you kill my child? The colonel stepped back. Shut your mouth, woman. But no one else did. The murmurs grew into thunder. Some of his men removed their hats, others lowered their guns. Miguel stepped forward slowly, the boards creaking beneath his boots. You hid the body, he said, buried it behind the corral. But the backlands don't swallow lies forever. The wind always uncovers the truth. Duarte reached for his pistol, but Miguel was faster. The gun flew from the colonel's hand, clattering to the ground. The sound rang across the square. Birds took flight. Silence fell again. Rosa, still kneeling, looked at the two men as if watching her own fate unfold. Miguel took a deep breath. You took everything from her, her father, her home, her child, her name. But you won't take the truth. Duarte staggered, his mask of power cracking. You think you can judge me? I am the law here, he shouted, his voice trembling. Miguel turned to the crowd. Then hear the law of this man. A law that hangs women and kills children. Is that the justice you follow? The faces in the crowd changed. Old men who'd always kept their heads down raised their eyes. The blacksmith stepped forward, then the baker, then a woman holding her baby. The colonel looked around, and for the first time, he looked afraid. Rosa rose slowly. The rope still brushed her neck, but she was standing. You called me barren, Duarte. But the only barren thing here is your heart. The wind picked up, swirling her dress and the dust around her. Miguel removed his hat in respect. Rosa walked up to the colonel and stopped. Look at me, Duarte. I'm not your curse. I'm the memory of everything you destroyed. The colonel tried to speak, but the people closed in, forming a circle. No one touched him. The collective stare was enough to strip away all authority. The priest stepped forward, crucifix in hand. Do you have anything to say before God says it for you? Duarte shook his head, face pale. I just wanted to cleanse my family's name. And you stained the soul of the whole town, the priest replied. One of the henchmen cut the hanging rope. The sound of the knot loosening broke the spell that had held everyone prisoner. Rosa breathed deeply for the first time in years. The people began murmuring her name softly, as if in prayer. Miguel looked to the horizon. The sun was setting, painting everything in orange and gold. Rosa, the wind has changed. It's time to go. She hesitated. And what about him? She asked, looking at the fallen colonel. Destiny takes care of those who've lost their way. Miguel took his horse by the reins and helped Rosa climb up. The square fell silent once more. The crowd parted as the sound of hooves echoed like a hymn. Behind them, the colonel knelt in the dust, his cigar extinguished, his eyes empty. As they rode away, the wind blew harder, raising whirlwinds of sand. Miguel looked up at the red sky. The backlands always collect their debts. Rosa, sometimes it just takes a while. She gripped his arm firmly. This time, Miguel, the backlands gave something back, and they rode off into the sun and dust, while behind them, the church bell tolled softly, not for death, but for rebirth. Months passed since that day the backlands stopped to watch. The sun was still the same, cruel, round, burning even the soul, but something had changed in the air. The story of the woman who faced the colonel spread across villages like wildfire. No one knew exactly how to tell it. Some said Duarte had gone mad, others that he'd fled north. But everyone remembered Rosa riding beside Miguel, leaving behind the village that once tried to kill her. They went to the mountains, built a small wooden house by a narrow river where the water still ran clean. Miguel worked the land. Rosa planted seeds. Her hands, once marked by chains and sewing, learned to touch the earth. The silence that once meant fear now meant peace. Sometimes, on cold nights, she woke to echoes of screams and the church bell, but Miguel was always there, holding her hand until dawn. Without realizing it, the people of Snow Bento began to change too. Stories travel fast in the backlands, and when one man dares to defy power, fear begins to die. Women started to lift their heads. Men thought twice before raising a hand. Snow Bento do Sol, once a town on its knees, was learning to walk. A year later, a traveler arrived from the south with news. They found Colonel Duarte's body near the old corral, he said. There was a letter in his pocket. No one knew what it said, but the wind that afternoon carried a different sound, as if bringing a late confession. Miguel listened in silence. Rosa wiped her hands on her apron and looked at the horizon. The wind kept its promise, she said, no anger, only certainty. Over time, their little house became a refuge for wanderers, people fleeing drought, mothers with children, wounded cowboys. Miguel never refused help. The earth only gives fruit to those who share their bread, he used to say. Rosa cared for everyone, as if repaying the world for every tear she had shed. One afternoon, a boy appeared at the gate, thin, sunburned, with light-colored eyes. He carried a crumpled note. They said a woman named Rosa lives here. She knelt down. That's me, son. The boy handed her the paper. Miguel unfolded it and read, For Rosa, from whom fate once stole a child. If the wind wills it, he will return. There was no signature, only a notary's seal at the bottom. Rosa stared at the boy, heart pounding. What's your name? They call me Gabriel. Miguel drew a deep breath. And where are you from, Gabriel? From a place called Fazenda Velha, where they say Colonel Duarte once lived. Silence fell heavy. Rosa sat down, the note trembling in her hands. The boy looked at her, not understanding. Miguel put a hand on her shoulder. The backlands collect, Rosa, he murmured, but sometimes they return what they took. Days passed in confusion and hope. Gabriel stayed. He helped with the animals, learned to ride. When he smiled, Rosa saw in his eyes the reflection of the baby she thought she had lost. Time confirmed what the heart already knew. No proof, no papers, only the ancient certainty the wind had carried back. Years passed. Miguel aged, his hair turning white, but his step remained steady. Rosa planted flowers in the yard, rare in that part of the world. Each flower, she said, replaces an old pain with a new memory. The boy grew into a man, rode like his father, saw the world with his mother's calm and courage. One full moon night, the three sat by the fire. The flames cracked softly. Miguel looked at the sky. You know, Rosa, the backlands taught me something. No man owns destiny. We just learn how to ride it. She smiled. And when the wind changes, we change with it. The next morning, a traveler passing through carried the tale onward. He spoke of a woman who survived the gallows, a cowboy who defied power, and a boy who returned with the wind. In every town, in every marketplace, people retold the story, sometimes exaggerating, sometimes forgetting parts. But one thing never changed, that in the backlands of Snow Bento do Sol, one day, justice rode side by side with love. They say Rosa and Miguel lived there until their last days, and when the wind blows strong in that region, you can still hear the sound of hooves across the dry earth, and a woman's voice whispering softly, "Destiny may take its time, but it never forgets the way." And so, the Backlands finally rested.